Okay. So if you look in chat, this is the link page. You see that?
Perfect. I see it. Let me hold on. I gotta log on my damn work email so I can send this to my coworker. Ah, shit. All right. No, I'm really happy my coworkers are so thrilled that I do stuff like this.
Where do you work? Oh,
I
wait,
work.
I don't know if you want to tell people that. So,
I'm fine with it. I work at the Center for Community Change here in DC. I was gonna say that in my intro.
okay, good. I'm gonna broadcast it to people so they have some time to get in. Let me just make sure it works. We're gonna wait for Anasa. So if you look in chat, this is the link page.
Perfect.
Working perfectly.
Uh, okay, here we go. Oh, I didn't mean to click on it.
Did you start it?
Me?
Mhm.
Yes, I'm actually going to move my computer.
Okay, because we started the broadcast.
Oh, okay. Hi. Well, I'm ready. I'm just gonna. That's okay. I can tie this into the millennial experience too. Living with your family sometimes means that you have to navigate rooms that people are using or will be using. Yes, I know you don't have any juice. You guys can go ahead and start if you want.
So, welcome everyone to what is hopefully the first of many chats about the Millennial of Color experience, as well as right today we're focusing on Black millennials. I'm going to be speaking with two very, very lovely and active women who I have met through Twitter and have been good friends of mine. My name is Sadette. I am known for blogging and tweeting and generally causing trouble as Black Amazon. I have written in Salon, I've written in The Toast, I've written for Exo Jane. I am currently working on a project called POC Millennials, where I will be interviewing for the next 2 years up until the 2016 election, millennials of color all around the world, based on the idea of that these voices need to be represented. And that project is what caused me to want to start this chat today. We're going to try and keep it to about an hour, and we want to talk about things that impact us as millennials. And I'm also co-editor with the fantastic Anasa on something called The Clap Black, where we study pop music and media culture through the lens of Black history and Black sociological analysis. And I work 40 hours a week because, yes, everyone needs a job in this day and age. So I am going to turn it over to my co-editor, Anasa, to introduce herself and any of her projects.
Okay. Well, my name is Inasa. I am a writer, performer, background in dance and all that good stuff. Currently living down south. I guess what about myself? went to school in New York, got a BA, then went over to the University of Mississippi, got an MA in Southern Studies, looking at the history of Black folks in the U.S. South particularly. Then did a PhD program in history for about 2.5 years or so, and then realized that this was not the way to go, and then moved back home in January. Ever since, I've been doing mostly writing, doing some freelance work, had a piece that appeared in, what is the name of Shane Lee's magazine? I'm blanking on it right now. Model View Culture, which is pretty awesome. And doing the tweeting thing, the tweeting and tumbling thing, which I've been doing for a few years now at So True. On Twitter at so_TREU. It was born out of a misspelling. And yeah, along with Sadette, you know, doing the We Clap Black. Generally, I'm interested in Black performance culture, Black digital culture, how we express ourselves, and also Black politics, Black life, Black everything. It's kind of my thing. Yeah, so is there anything I'm leaving out?
You're real cute.
Thank you.
I also would like to give a special shout out as a performer as well. I perform with the Body Ecology Performance Ensemble. So, hi, my loves. And I would like to throw it to the fantastic L-Dubs Lauren, our final participant.
Yes, hi. I'm Lauren. I'm LDub1920 on Twitter. That's L like the magazine, dub like a reggae dub, _1920 on Twitter. I do a few things. I'm the digital campaign manager at the Center for Community Change, where I do digital strategy and capacity building for our economic justice campaign, which we're about to kick off pretty soon. I am also a social media consultant by night. I've written for Alternet, written for Blog Her. I was seen on CNN a couple of years ago talking about getting a job with Obama in 2008. If you Google me, you can find that. And that's about it. I live in D.C., went to GW, George Washington University, studied English there. I was really active on campus. I started the Black Women's Forum so I can help create a safe space for Black students, Black female students at George Washington. It is still there. And so I'm really, really passionate about creating safe spaces for women of color, especially Black women, and finding ways that we can build community online and offline as well.
Awesome sauce. Thank you so much for being willing to be with us today. Just a social media note. If you have questions or would like to respond to us in any way, we will be using the hashtag Millennials of Color, hashtag MILLENNIALSOFCOLOR. Yay! I can spell. You talk with things. The chat function right now is not doing that great with Google+. But I want to give a little background on what made me decide to do this today. We are all, and I'd like to take a moment to send our love, our prayers, our well wishes with the community of Ferguson, Missouri right now, who is undergoing what I think is a massive political action of our time, and yes, of our generation, in response to the murder of Mike Brown and the subsequent handling of that murder by the police force, by the government, by the United States, and also by the media. But I'm applying for a fellowship to talk about how we cover media and to help create new media. And one of the things that I've noticed very, very often is that millennials, aka the people from the ages of, and this is the only year that's true, 14 to 34, born between 1980 and 2000, are a very hot topic right now. What do we use? They're savvy. Where are they going to go? How many platforms can we create to bring them in, bring their advertising dollars in? But I noticed a distinct missingness from that organization, in so much as millennials usually are someone white, someone middle class, usually coastal, to be quite honest, and described as having a very indulged, very kind of coddled upbringing and having no life direction. There was an article in New York Times that also talked about this. It's like, well, I don't know if I'll ever get a real job. And I thought it was just, there's an amazing contrast with what is going on with our millennials of color and our people of color. And for today, specifically Black people, because we are all Black women, and we're going to speak from that experience of how we are talked about in media and how we experience real life and how we experience our interactions with being millennials based on race and gender and all of the other things coming up. And this is the first of what I hope are many conversations around what exactly is the separation between the reality of our lives and the way we are talked about. And I think Ferguson was an amazing touch point, because one of the things that has really come up a lot is violence in our community. And Lauren, you said beautifully about starting that safe space at GW. I really would like to put forth as our first question, what is safety as a millennial, and specifically as Black women millennials? What are the conversations that we need to have around that are not being had now?
Well, I think we first need to talk about what, to me, safety is freedom, right? I always say that I don't want equality, I want freedom. I want the freedom to walk down the street and not worry about whether or not I'm going to get shot or harassed, or if someone's going to attack me, or if someone's going to try to demand my attention, demand that I smile, etc. And when I'm able to do that, the moment I'm able to do that, that's freedom to me. And that is safety. You know, being able to make choices about my sexuality, or, you know, whether it means that I can choose to, have sex on the first date or whatever it is I want to do without being judged for it, without someone trying to say I'm a thought or whatever. And thought means that hoe over there, for those of you who don't know what a thought is. It's a very stupid term, never use it. But that's what it means. Like, to me, safety is freedom. Freedom to just be whatever the hell I want to be, do whatever the hell I want to do, and not be worried about my life being threatened because I'm making these choices.
Inasa?
I definitely agree with that. And I think also, I actually kind of had a moment where I think kind of exemplifies it, where just now I retweeted the tweet that you made about, oh, we're going live, this, that, or the other. And then I started to put it on my Tumblr as well, like, oh, I'm having this conversation, this, that, or the other. But then I stopped because on Tumblr, I've experienced certain forms of long-term harassment that I haven't received to the same extent on Twitter, at least not yet. And even though there's no, not to say that Twitter is a safer space than Tumblr, or that there's some overlap between those two, something about, going to that space just made me, especially the experience I've had over the past, 2 years there, where there, dedicated hate blogs, linking to my, Facebook, and, linking to my profile at my graduate school when I was there, and, all those kind of things. I was just, something about being in that space made me kind of go, nah. But not to say that Twitter is any safer. And so I think part of what safety has to mean for millennials is also safety on the internet, and safety in terms of digital platforms, because, everything is social media now. Everything is the newest, hottest platform, the newest, latest, whatever. What is Twitter going to do next in its development? What is Facebook going to do next in its, and it's all these things about, maybe IPOs and, stock markets and innovation, but safety is never taken into account. Right, and only when certain people are put into danger on these platforms do we see anything resembling a, concrete, specific, but at the same time it's never comprehensive, right? So it takes Robin Williams' daughter saying, putting out a letter and saying, I'm going to be leaving Twitter, right? Not social media, I'm going to be leaving Twitter and this site because of the extreme harassment that I experienced there, and I just can't deal with it anymore. At that point, then Twitter can say, oh, okay, we should probably do something about that. But they're even still, So, but at the same time, Angry Black Lady wrote an article, I think today, and I'm also blanking on that, Reality Check, yeah. And she was talking about the long-term harassment she's experienced on Twitter, and how Twitter just, hasn't done anything. And I've experienced similar, lack of response from Tumblr, even from Facebook. And it wasn't, I didn't experience this I think, reaching back, into the MySpace, or whatever days, that. It wasn't the same, even though, there was there was some low levels of it, at least for me personally. It wasn't on the same level just because in terms of, social media at that time was just different, and we were just not at such a high stage in the evolution of it all. So, we can kind of, everyone's pretty comfortable, assigning millennials with the experience of social media and with the digital communities and the internet, hashtag millennials, but no one's really concerned about our safety on there. So for me, safety would mean being able to feel safe in these digital spaces that I've carved out for myself just by being born in the generation that I was born in, right? Like LiveJournal wasn't an advertised, it wasn't something I saw on TV and then I got onto it. It was something that, I was in college and my friends were on it, so I got on it, right? So yeah, I think that should be part of the definition of safety for us as well.
I think one of the things that safety has to be important, and I believe that both the fact that you say safety is freedom is we often neglect to talk about that that safety is something we have never been guaranteed as a generation, specifically as a generation of Black people, that it's just been assumed. And when we talk about millennials, they talk about, oh, they're safe and they're coddled, and right now we are in what has been a spate of young Black men being killed, young Black women being killed, just trying to go home. Trayvon Martin, Keisha Boyd, all of these people trying to go home. Eric Gardner was on his corner. Mike Brown was less than like 200 feet from his house. We can't go home without literally being in constant danger. Mm-hmm. And there's not an application of that safety in terms of the online spaces and social media. There's been a rash of women they're like, oh my God, women are harassed online. And there hasn't been an actual reach back or even rudimentary research into where a lot of that harassment comes from. If you go into Reddit, in certain spaces, it's a cesspool. It is a racist, misogynistic cesspool. But it's considered a great platform. And then suddenly when certain women get attacked on it, it's like, wow, we have a really not nice culture. We're talking about Ferguson, and my experience with Twitter has become to the point where literally I like to collect. I've been spreading the links, and I have gotten reams and reams and reams of people saying, you niggas need to go work. You need to grow up and stop having everyone take care of you. He deserved to die. Bada, 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 that are just accepted. Like, that's part of the millennial experience. And people literally sum it up as, well, people on the internet are mean, but it really is, well, your version of mean versus my experience of mean are different things. You're thinking somebody who calls me fat, or somebody who says something evil about my mama. This is now, we're talking about people who are talking about our death, our expiration, wishing sexual assault on us, and glorifying in the death of our young people. That's our experience of lack of safety. And that's
Trayvoning, yeah.
Huh?
Trayvoning, after Trayvon died, and then that whole thing of, like, people...
Yeah.
Yep.
Lying down dead, and that being like a social media meme, right? Like, you being able to click on the hashtag and seeing, like, lists of people doing that.
I think what I really don't like to see is when Black women are talking about being harassed online or even offline, people are very quick to say that it's either not harassment or that it doesn't happen. And, remember when everyone did that thing called You OK Sis that day? And then there was like a bingo. There was like people already created like a bingo like game sheet that was like, and everything on there. So there were things that said, well, fine, I just won't talk to you anymore. And I'm like, it's not just about talking to me or saying hello, because it's not just you saying hello. If this was just about men saying hello to me on the street, we wouldn't be having this conversation. But they're so quick to be like, oh, well, it's just flirting. And I'm like, no, it's harassment, Mm-hmm. And every time we try to call it out, whether it's online, offline, on the way to work, whatever it is, on Twitter, people are so quick to, invalidate it and say that it's not happening to us. Mm-hmm. So it's almost like they're gaslighting us, right? So then you start thinking, well, did I really experience that? Like, is that really what's happening, or am I just going crazy at this point,
Mm-hmm. And I'm glad you brought up You OK Sis, which was started by Feminista Jones, because who's experiencing some health troubles, and we're sending her so much love. But one of the big things was about is that there was a point when there was literally a concerted effort by basically the dregs of 4chan, these are not the big dogs, to infiltrate in really the most racist way possible, and I know so you can speak to that, Black women feminism. And one of the things that we often don't talk that I really wanted to bring forth when we talk about safety, and I love that you brought up social media, is that when we talk about social media, we also have to talk about how, in terms of the voices of millennials of color, of just the people of color, because actually the range of Black folk on social media is much larger than the small millennial range. A lot of why we use social media is because we can't be seen anywhere else. Mm-hmm. There was an American Prospect article where they looked at the major liberal publications, so the people most likely to be diverse. And we're talking about staffs of 40 with maybe 2 people of color. And these were like, this was the liberal media, so we're not even going to look at other things. So people are like, well, get off the internet. Well, if I want to start to have a communal conversation, if I want to have a conversation about what's happening with millennials, of people of color, women of color, as a Black woman, where else do you expect me to go? It's not like large discussions of street harassment for Black women in anything but like Essence and Ebony. It's not like we see large discussions about representation of Black people in theater or movies. Like, let's be honest, look at those and look at their rates of representation of people of color and Black women in very much specific. They're abysmal. So yeah, I'm going to be on social media. I have to be on the internet because so much of our experience has been about building things from the ground up because they're not there for us. And even when it was finally covered in certain spaces, the experience of Black women as a target for harassment, as a target for abuse, were kind of just swept out of the rug onto this great big gossamer cloud of don't ignore them, ignore the hate. We women can stay together. And I'm like, yeah, but 4chan's not publishing your info. They're publishing my friend's info. I'm not worried about you're not worried about a random person coming into your job if you have the type of job that anyone could walk into and blasting your face off. We are. And these are the people that they're saying. And there was like, in addition to a lack of support, there was just a dismissal. And that's a lot of it about, and that's, I think, translate very much into the real world experience of right now where we are watching, in many ways, our citizenship and our humanity be challenged in like clear-cut, body slamming reporters, tear gassing residential neighborhoods ways. And people will literally sit there and go, well, but you don't like.
And I think also another part of the go outside bit is go outside to where exactly. Like, you know, it's this whole, a lot of times there's this whole like, oh, get off the internet and go outside and do stuff. And it's kind of like, I mean, before you even get to like the fact that for a lot of us going outside means fielding just about the same amount of violence, you know, as we do online, like where are the common spaces? You know what I mean? Like, where's like the, you know, like where's a place where I can just go and without spending any money, you know, without having to travel to the white side of town, without having to, you know, worry too much about gas, without it, you know, being in a place that's dedicated towards something else, like, say, a YMCA, which, you know, like, you're not there to have conversations, you're there to work out or do an after-school program or, you know, go swimming or, like, whatever. Like, where are these spaces? Where are these, like, idyllic spaces where we can go and have these conversations and have people listen to us and like have our realities respected. Like, and a lot of us are living in places that are like being crazy gentrified right now. Like, a lot of these spaces that we did have at one time are now no longer there or being systematically like, you know, demolished or bulldozed or moved, you know, further outside of the city center. Yeah, so it's and then when you do go outside and do things, you know, you have the experience of, yeah, like in these spaces where you're supposedly supposed to be so progressive and you're supposed to be coming together about, say, Mike Brown, then you still have to deal with a certain level of like misogynistic, misogynoir, sexism, harassment, violence. And I think also part of it is like, I think it's an issue of one, not recognizing violence that is done upon us or our bodies, because like that's America. Like, you know, like violence done upon Black women's bodies is kind of like the foundation of this country. And also like people have very narrow conceptions, I think, of what violence is, right? Like we're gonna think like if someone hauls off and punches you in the face, like, okay, yeah, that's violent, you know.
Right, but if you know somebody's trying to get your attention on the street and you ignore them because you don't want to talk to them or because you're on your way to work and they yell at you and they say, fuck you, you're ugly anyway, that's why I fuck white women, blah, 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 blah.
Right.
Like, how is that not violence?
Right. Or even on a more like the one experience I had when I was, again, like, where do you go? Like, I was going to, like, you know, the beauty store, like the hair store, and, you know, feelings about, like, you know, that being a space where I can kind of, like, be around other Black women and, like, it's kind of chill for a second. You know, there's, like, a group of dudes outside who are, like, you know, trying to sell their mixtapes or whatever because it's apparently still 2004. And, you know, they're trying to get me to buy their mixtape. I didn't buy it when I went in. I was in for maybe like 10 minutes. When I came back out, they were like, oh, this, that, and the other. And I was like, no, I'm good. And I had on this shirt, like, from Urban Outfitters or something that said, broke is the new black. Like, right, like, everyone's broke. Like, blah, blah, blah is the new black is in the fashion choice, right? And, like, yeah, we can get into, like, the subliminals of it and, like, whatever. But, like, the saying X, Y, Z is the new black is, like, a statement about fashion and not about race, right? So then they see my shirt and they're like, yo, what are you wearing? What does your shirt say? Da-da-da-da, what does it say? Is that broke's new black? Oh, no, you got to change that shirt. That's not cool. This, that, the other. And it was just like, you know, a mild inconvenience. And even in terms of, like, street harassment, not by far the worst reaction I would have. But I'm just like, would you say this to a dude? Like, if I was a dude and I had on this exact same shirt, would you say, hey, dude, hey, dog, you can't wear that shirt, man. You know, you got to change that shirt. You got to take that shirt off and put on. Like, no. No, so, like, where is a space that I can exist in where there's not someone who feels like they have the right to be constantly telling me what I should be doing, or have the, you know, blank check to, you know, tell me that what I'm always doing is always wrong and that I should be doing, like, X, Y, and Z. Like, where is that space where I can just exist as is and it not be a problem for anyone?
You bring up something interesting because you talk a little bit about violence and you talk about brokenness, but I think that that's a very big issue for millennials, and specifically millennials of color, where some of that violence is our ability to sustain and survive and to get ourselves employed. But there is a huge amount of underemployment for millennials of color. There was, I think, an article in Think Progress and couple of articles where they said very bluntly that millennials of color, specifically Black women, were achieving degrees at a higher rate than ever, but were underemployed.
Right.
What now become very much as in vogue is the intern economy and the network economy of, you know, somebody that hooks you up with a side job and that's how you get in, or you do an internship and you don't necessarily have to have a degree, but that's how you get employed. But there was no discussion of, well, how are people building these networks, and are we talking about the racism that these networks are built from? Because there was an article in Bloomberg where people that even noticed that say, yeah, when it comes to networking, Black people are not being included in the networks, even though they are doing all of the right things, but it turned into, well, Black people have to network better. But at what point do we actually sit and have a discussion and say that creating an inability for qualified people of color to support themselves is a form of violence? The report from this was in Talking Points memo, and I actually remember writing about it 6 years earlier about how the wealth of the average black woman was, I think, $150 or $5. The wealth of the
It
average
was $5.
$5.
No, this was like maybe in 2010. I remember that.
Yeah, I wrote about it in 2010, and it was that the average wealth of a black woman is $5. The average Latina is actually about $50 in debt, but the average wealth of a white woman is 32,000. Like, these are the great gradations of women of the same age.
Right.
We're all in the millennial generation. They were even looking at the similar qualifications.
Yeah.
And every time you published something was like, isn't that terrible? And I was like, well, yes, this is terrible, and it's nice that you're paying attention, but are we going to talk about the kind of networks that when this was originally making the rounds in 2010 among people, millennials of color, no one that was plugged into the networks to see what was happening. And part of that problem was that none of the people who are supposed to talk about it really hired black people. And how is that, and why isn't that considered a kind of violence? Because a lot of our black experience, a lot of our experience as black women is treated as this weird kind of magical, you might as well be on the moon, for as much as people actually are aware of what's going on in our worlds and our experience as something that needs to be researched almost like everybody's going on a jungle safari, and not a case of real people experiencing real oppression and having real voices.
Right.
So I work in digital media. I work in digital organizing, actually. So the people who use Facebook and Twitter to make changes, whether it's policy, or organizing people offline, and that kind of thing. Popular criticism of the online organizing space and the digital space is that it is still very white and very male. I was underemployed living in Los Angeles with my mother for about a year and a half before moving back to DC. And I know that there were probably white women and white men in my shoes and kind of in my same situation, but they have a different network than I do. So you know what I had to do to find a job? I crowdsourced a job. I started a hashtag on Twitter. I wrote a blog post. I posted on Facebook. I told everybody, I need a job, you guys. I want a job in these fields, and I need to get the hell out of LA. So can somebody help me? And there's some organizations that have done a great job of recruiting and training people of color. New Organizing Institute is one of them. I was actually a New Media Bootcamp alumni from 2012. In my class, there was only a handful of black folks. I went there this year, and there was at least 10, which was, I know that still sounds low, but like when you're used to 2 years ago, you can count on one hand how many black folks were in the room, and then all of a sudden that number is doubled. Like that's progress, That's progress. But I realized that I probably had to work harder to find a job than the average white person would have had to. And part of that is just the fact that if I'm up for a digital director job and a white man is up for it too, he's going to get that job over me it's more likely he will get that job over me. And I have to come to terms with that, and that means that I have to be more creative in how I find that position, and I have to make better uses of the network I already have, because it's not that he has a better network than me. It's that white man probably has a different network than me. And different meaning there are people probably in his network that make the decisions in terms of who gets hired, where I am not likely to have that kind of network.
I mean, one of the things that we talk specifically about our experiences as people of color online is time and time again I've been in situations where people think I'm stupid because I don't lead with my credentials, or I don't lead with a live discussion of these are all of the things I do. So and I've had conversations where people go, well, have you read the American Constitution? I majored in American history at the University of Pennsylvania. I had to keep the copy of the American Constitution on my phone. 1, because I'm a nerd, and 2, because I'm black, so I like to have it around. But there's an assumption that black people aren't doing. Black people aren't achieving and they're not trying, and that because we are all in this like colorblind society, that there aren't advantages towards not being Black, and they're not replicated in this young generation.
Mm.
It's very like I don't want to talk about where I work right now. Don't want to. Not gonna. But there is this real interesting factor I've noticed where I've gone toe to toe with a lot of prominent social media figures, many of whom are backed by major platforms who get paid for this, and we have similar reaches.
Mm-hmm.
What are we talking about when we say, well, use your network? It's like, we have the same network, but I've gone into places and been told by people, well, we don't think you're people are kind of scared that you're not a person that works well with others. And I'm just like, that's very strange, because I get along with people. And it's something that I've heard about various Black women in different tones and in different ways. Like, well, you don't get along with people. They're not the right fit. And I think Sarah Kendzior of Al Jazeera does amazing work about this. But we've kind of normalized this idea of creating a very secret discussion of fitness, of economic security, of opportunity that magically excludes people of color, specifically Black people, while saying things like, don't go to college, it's a fine, that's great for you, you don't need to go to college, go out and develop that, where it's just like, okay, but a Black person with a college degree has similar job chances as a white person without a high school degree. So those messages you're giving are both not true and really indicative of how much, when it comes to looking at a generation of people, you factored the Black experience completely out. You're not thinking about it at all.
And I also, because I hate that argument for exactly this reason, and also just most of the people who are making this argument have college degrees. Like, it would be one thing if it was like Eminem making this argument, right? Like, all right, you never went to college, fine, whatever. It worked out for you, that's great. But these are people who are like teaching at college, saying, no, don't. This is such a waste of time. Just don't. And the reason why they're saying that is because they are surrounded by students who probably, if they weren't at college, wouldn't make that much of a difference, because they have the money and the connections, and to be honest, they're probably skating anyway in college. They're probably not doing that great in college anyway, but like, in, great inflation at certain places is a thing. We don't have to get into that right now. So yeah, I can just, like, looking at, having taught at, institutions or having interacted with students at institutions that had a tendency to attract wealthier, whiter students. I could definitely see people from some of those age groups being like, yeah, you know what, if you don't go to college, that'll probably work out for you. But that's because they're white and or not Black, and because they have the money. Otherwise, it doesn't. And even with advanced degrees, it doesn't work out the same way for Black people. And I just really wish people would stop. Like, if you want to critique higher ed, and I personally think that academia is a site of violence in itself. I don't think it is a place that was meant for Black people, like, at least the ways it has developed in the U.S. Like, I think that the exclusion of Black people from higher ed, like, in various spaces, whether it's from the student body or from the administrative body or from the faculty body or from the leadership body, is definitely not an accident. And I don't think that inclusion is necessarily going to make things better, because I think a lot of times what tends to happen is that Black people get there and then are just as abusive and facilitating of that violence as, a white person or another non-Black person would be. So, I mean, I think if you want to kind of get into academia on that level, we can have that conversation. But we're also living in a world where like, the millennial experience is Dawn Bell, Cece McDonald, Trayvon Martin, Troy Davis, like, Melissa Alexander, like, deportation, like, no health insurance, and, like, the worst job prospects since the 1970s. And your advice for all that is to just forego the one thing, unfairly, albeit completely unfairly, but forego the one thing that gives you, like, at least a slightly better chance of being able to not get sucked in by all of that.
You said the magic word, and I specifically want to talk about this with Lauren here, because this is a young woman who is definitely working on her leadership in so many ways. But there has been a huge uptick in the idea of what a millennial leader is.
Mm-hmm.
And I really want to talk about that as well as the idea of social entrepreneurship for our last, 20 minutes. Because the idea of what we're going to be led to is really important to me right now. Because for me, what's on the table is I look at people like, I only know them by their hashtags, so forgive me, but at Tef Poe, at She's So Sadiddy, at Vandalism, at Awkward Duck, folks down in Ferguson doing the work of supporting a community under siege. And I look at people like Lauren Chiefalk doing the work with Save Wahhabi. And I look at people like Spark and Fierce. And I look at the work of certain programs that I've looked at, of what leadership is defined as for millennials and what leadership is the experience of people of color who try to do leadership. At Sweet Park, 18 Million Rising as well, is what are we considered leaders for is very different, because I see a lot of leadership where millennial leaders, once again, tend to be white, of a certain class. And I actually ended up writing an article about this, but we have a crop of leaders who don't look at the life experience of the people they're supposed to be leading. And they can't tell you about them. And even worse is that when you try to get in certain inroads or try to start certain conversations about this, you have such a struggle. And I want to give Lauren at least a good 5 minutes, because I know you do some work with the Democratic Party and women in the Democratic Party, to talk about your experiences of, what is it trying to be a young Black woman millennial trying to make these things happen or dealing with leadership.
I will say this, it's a little isolating because, yes, I'm in digital organizing. I work on economic justice issues. One of the challenges is trying to get the people who are kind of molding the campaign to think intersectionally about economic justice work. So it's like, sure, okay, there are poor people, yes, but do you know that women of color, that Black women make 67 cents to the white man's dollar? And so, of course, they're going to be in situations where they're more likely to be poor because they're getting paid less, or that, LGBTQ people of color are more likely to be unemployed because, people see that they are queer or that they're gay and they don't want to hire them. And so then that becomes a factor as to whether or not they're poor. It's not just about marriage for, queer people of color. It's not. That's the last thing on their mind when you can't find a job or when you're homeless, So that's been one challenge. The other challenge is that I don't know where all the other Black women are who do the kind of work I do. So sometimes I feel a little lonely. I'm one of 2 Black women on our team at my job, and I don't know who else I could talk to who is doing similar work or doing the same work I am for another organization that I could talk to and kind of exchange notes and maybe think about different tactics that maybe we could use. And I wish there was more of that, to be honest with you. Not saying there aren't any Black women in digital organizing, because there are, but it's really hard to build community within that small subset of people. I hope that's answering your question. I'm trying to. If you have any follow-up questions, let me know.
No, I want to talk about the experience of leadership because for me, in a lot of ways, becoming a leader online or a figure online was not a deliberate thing. And I find that I'll look at jobs where they ask for things like because work is an issue. I'm applying for a fellowship. I've looked at digital organizing jobs, but there's this idea of we look for leaders to do things that get a lot of press but don't affect policy.
Right.
Things that millennials care about real issues and we're going to bring them to them, but we're going to talk about it in sometimes the most racist, classist way possible.
Right.
One of them that really like personally hit me in my real like special happy place as a woman of color who has a illness, PCOS. There was the Hobby Lobby decision where it was, but one of the things that was talked about was just them going, there was a meme that went around the internet so many times where somebody went into Hobby Lobby, rearranged all of these blocks, and made a big mess of a Hobby Lobby display for their fight against and leadership for and social media management of their displeasure with their decision. And the first thing I thought was, there's a woman in Hobby Lobby who has to clean up after you, who may have to stay later after her shift because you did that, who also now knows that her job does not give her health insurance. That's how you made your day worse. So there's this moment where a whole lot of prominent feminists set this all around, and you're looking at the whole bunch of people, many of them who millennials who would work retail or work fast food or doing all this kind of organizing or trying to do this as a side job, hustle and a job where you're saying, well, the way you make your money is not something that we're concerned with. We're going to make fun of that by making your life harder because we're talking about womanhood. And I think that's what happens a lot is that we have a leadership that is so disconnected from what we actually experience. Some of the things are just like supremely, supremely both hurtful and negative. My actual focus and some of the work I've done with my girls as part of body ecology is Black women's reproductive justice issues. Reproductive justice. And when I say reproductive justice in the street, I mean in the street. I mean, I've been on the corner of Utica Avenue and the Parkway and doing performances about safe sex and having people say, someone should rape her, give she back shots. And then when you have a discussion in the New York Times about reproductive justice, no one mentions Black women at all. Not how they got their term. And finally, they have a discussion about it with when Monica R. Simpson of Sister Song writes that amazing letter, which everyone should read. It's on RH Reality Check, to Planned Parenthood about their things, about their omission. And it's just, here are all the ways where it feels safe to say we've been failed. We haven't just been ignored, but we've been failed and abused and appropriated. And everybody kind of went, we'll work on it someday. We'll work on it somehow. And when we circle back to the idea of what we were talking in the beginning of the safety, where while we were doing this kind of work, we were unsafe, and now we're appropriated, where is the leadership to start looking at that lay of the land and say we can do better towards Black women of a certain age because they are members of this group we are leading? Because I haven't seen that. That has been, in a lot of ways, where I've come in and where I've tried to develop certain kinds of leadership, not necessarily because I'm that prone to it, but because if I don't do it, there is nobody else, and I'm damn sure not going to leave it to y'all.
I think it's just funny how we can have and drive these conversations, but we can have and drive these conversations about, and I'm speaking as like our being like Black millennials, especially like Black women. I'm thinking about, people like, Bad Dominicana, on Twitter and Tumblr, T-Girl Interrupted, Shadi, who also goes by Black Fox on Tumblr. you know, just like, you know, struggling to be heard, you know, destruct. Just how and also kind of, you know, my background being that I am also one of the people who like look up and had a bit of a following too, and not at all trying to develop like this leadership position, right? Just like I always say, I have a big mouth. Like I just think a lot. I have a lot of thoughts. I have a lot of ideas, and oh, there's a space where I can just like just say whatever and just put it out there, and it's fine, and you know, it's okay, it's fine, and then you know, just kind of went from there. But it's just interesting how we can like develop these theories and develop these followings to the point that, you know, and not just develop these followings, then develop these vultures who are sort of constantly circling our work and picking out various parts of it, you know, major mainstream press. I have
University, Save Wahhabi, California College of the Arts.
California College of the Arts.
Well, rather than actually credit the Native women who had developed this work, rather than actually develop that, they literally took down off the internet their ethics agreement.
Like, and that I feel like I have more journalists following me than have offered me jobs. It's just funny that we can make this following and do all these things that we can't like eat off of it, right? Like, you know, I'm unemployed, I'm looking for a job, and then finding this really interesting thing where I'm like looking at some social media and some writing jobs, and people are like, oh, well, you know, like we want these voices and we want this approach. Send us like, you know, your bylines, or send us like whatever. And then I like look at what they produce, and I'm like, there's no way, I don't feel like I can turn things in, because the language that I use to express like the same issue that you say you want to hear from, but I know that the language I use to express myself in, like I can't turn that in as a writing sample.
I mean, my experiences have been very bluntly, I applied to more than a few places and was told that I wasn't the right fit.
Mm-hmm.
They were looking for something else. They didn't want to go forward. They'll keep me in mind. And then had half of their editorial staff follow me on Twitter. Like, literally had it in their bylines that they were following me on Twitter. And I was just like, okay. And then they were talking about, like, we really need to do these more in-depth voices. And I found this was very interesting, because I'm going to bring this up a little, the idea of toxic Twitter. Lord, you gave a deep sigh from a.
It was from the soul, from the earth.
Great. Say it. Come on in the room. Tell us what's going on.
First of all, I want to say one note on the or not being a good fit. I always think that language is coded for you don't look like us. Or
across so many.
So it always seems like that, because then you get to see who they hired, and it's somebody who probably has a similar resume as you, but what they mean is you don't fit into who we look like or our culture, you know? And it's easier for them to hire someone who looks like them, lives like them, etc., than it is to hire someone who has all the same qualifications, but just doesn't look like them, doesn't live like them, you know? In terms of toxic Twitter, I think it's so funny how, you know, the minute what they call toxic, I call, you know, I'm defending myself against your violence. That's what that is. And the minute we call somebody out and tell them, don't treat me this way, then we're toxic for telling them that they're being an asshole. And it just, I mean, but the minute that, but when they mistreat us, abuse us, etc., and we call them out, you know, how dare we call them toxic, right? Even though what they do is toxic. So.
I think
to defend.
Would you say that again?
I said no selves to defend, which shout out at Prison Culture is the name of an exhibit.
Yes.
Go check out in Chicago if you're in the area.
Yes.
But you know, me personally, I talk a lot about shout out to Zadia Hartman, the afterlife of slavery, and anti-blackness, and the idea that, you know, that the transatlantic slave trade kind of really mattered. Kind of, you know, a thing that goes on for about 300 years probably, and is central to, you know, things like major systems that still influence us today, like, oh, capitalism, you know, countries. There were countries that were created, you know, out of this whole experience, the idea of what it means to be human, what it means to be a man or a woman, to be in a gendered body, was deeply influenced by this process that, like, engulfed the world for, like, again, a few hundred centuries. But just the idea that, like, you know, if we're still sort of talking about slavery, it's not because, and I'm paraphrasing Hartman here, it's not because it's this bygone thing, it's because we're still living through its afterlife. We're still living through its effects. Like, we're still living with the idea that black people, and black women especially, do not have the right to defend themselves, right? Like,
we're living with the idea that it's very questionable if black people have the right to say no.
Yes.
Like, looping it back to the start of the conversation is that a lot of this is like what we're looking at is like what happens when a young black person tells someone who's perceived to be an authority no. I don't have to answer your question. I don't have to get out of the street. I don't have to be nice when I'm asking for help. I can exist in public, and I shouldn't have to worry about your feelings if I'm not an actual threat.
Right.
And what happens to black bodies that do that? They die.
Different spaces. You know, what happens when a black woman says, no, black man, actually, it's not my job to be your moral center?
What happens when black women say, like, I'm sorry, we are not, you're white women feminists, no, we're not about this life where we do all of your work and you tell me that we're going to get to your racism at some point in the future someday, while you call yourself an intersectional feminist. Hire no black women, have no stories by black women, have one black woman in your organization, and haven't reached out to a predominantly black neighborhood in 20 years. Like, when was like one of the things I said is like, I can't tell you the last time I saw Planned Parenthood in my neighborhood. I don't think NARAL does not come down to the rock. We have to talk also, and I want to end soon because we've been talking for an hour. Time flies when you're having fun. But how, as millennials, black millennials, millennials of color, we've had to develop entirely different organizings and strategies and experiences than what's being marketed because we're not there. So, like, I've had experiences where I'm living in a neighborhood where churches did a lot of the sexual work in terms of outreach because ain't nobody else there to do it. How we look at the work of kind of culture and art really specifically is not discussed. And I actually want to end on something slightly lighter. I'm not sure if we'll feel better about it, but I think we'll have a little more fun with it. But Lauren actually brought this up like 15 minutes ago, but black millennials in pop culture, where are we? How are we actually represented in the media we consume?
We're on YouTube. We're on YouTube. I mean, there's a girl's equivalent with all black women on YouTube. You know, Roomy Lover Friends is about some black 20-somethings, you know, which is very popular. Where every now and then you see us on TV. They got black dudes on The New Girl. You know, 2 black dudes now. How long is that gonna last?
I'm surprised there's even 2.
Yeah, I mean, there's 2 of them. You know, but we're not really on TV. I can't tell how old Mary Jane is supposed to be on being Mary Jane. I believe she's in her mid-30s.
Yeah.
I don't think she's our age.
She's not. She's so not 20.
Yeah, that's a missed opportunity. I wish there was some kind of.
Yeah.
I wish BET would tap into that, but that's another conversation for another time. But I find that the web series culture is like a very, it's a field, or it's a creative field that's like ripe for this kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if we want to see black millennials in pop culture, we have to create the spaces ourselves. You know,
Well,
and that's why and like for instance, Aqua Black Girl is great, and it started, but of course it has its problems. But it started a whole genre of web series centered around Black millennials.
Like, we talk a lot about DIY culture and kind of larger, kind of looking at Pinterest and all of those things in terms of like that kind of very colorblind but actually really racialized way. But when you look at like Black millennials and like the culture we use and the one we've referenced, that we're very DIY, because you're very right. When I think of like Black millennials and even Black content production in pop culture, I think of, and this is where I get to give shout outs and talk about people I really enjoy. Reagan Gomez has an online web series. You often find a lot of Black people in podcasts.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody on the Loud Speakers networks. There's Crystals and Kid Fury with The Read, Freshalina with Neck of the Woods, Black Nerd Girl. All of these kind of like Black nerd podcasts have moved very specifically into the
hip hop is for lovers.
Hip hop is for lovers. Yes.
My fave.
Yes.
I love Dope Girl Fresh.
Dope Girl Fresh.
I mean, there's literally like a stretch of time during the week where if you wanted to fill up your whole week with Black millennials, you could. You've got Jesus versus Mero on Tuesday. You've got which is another podcast. I think they're around our age. I don't think they're much older than us.
They're like
early 30s. Yeah, you've got The Read on Thursdays. Like, if you want to watch Almost Home, or if you want to watch Roomie Lover Friends.
Twittering While Black, we wanted to give a shout out to Alon James right now. Alon James White, who's down in Ferguson.
Mm-hmm.
And who is like creating media. Like, there is this huge goal of like people who, however we feel about it, one way or the other, Black folk are creating media on a DIY tip because there's nowhere else to see us. Can you name a Black millennial comic book character that's a Black woman?
Ooh.
I'm not a comic person, so I'm probably not the best to ask, but no.
I'm not a comic book nerd.
I am reasonably a comic book nerd, and I think
I like comic book movies. And no. Marvel is like playing coy with Black Panther, so.
Yeah, Marvel has they're really trying to Euro step the hell out of being directly asked about Black Panther.
I actually read something like just like yesterday, I think, where they were like, where some, again, don't read Marvel, so I don't know exactly who it was. Someone in charge was like, more questions in terms of movies than I get about like Avengers 3 or Iron Man 4, I get asked about Black Panther.
Because we want a movie. How do we all of we got Avengers, Avengers 2, Captain America, Winter Soldier.
We're on the Flash now. We're on the Flash. Like, wait, is that?
We're getting an Ant-Man movie before we get a damn Black Panther movie just in theaters.
And it's like, okay, it was a bit of a trick because I know we have a Muslim character with Ms. Marvel. There was a Latina Captain America character. The new Captain America is the Falcon. But I love him. But, like, there's not a Black woman character. And we got through damn near 7 movies, and we don't have a speaking part for a woman of color. We don't have a single speaking part for a woman of color in any of the Marvel movies. Not a single one. The Black superhero we had was Storm. We had Storm.
Well, there's this article I'm going to read later tonight that references Marvel.
Running past. I don't think we really saw her, but we kind of saw her trotting past, and the one Native American superhero died in Days of Future Past. That was like 20 seconds. Yeah.
There's an article that I'm going to read later on tonight about Marvel Boot Camp, which is where they kind of develop the scripts and everything for their, for their movies.
Mm-hmm.
And I found myself wondering, like, do they have a diversity problem the way that the boot camp I went through had a diversity problem? So I'm wondering, do they have how many Black people do they have in the room? How many Black women are involved with this boot camp? Because I'm telling you, representation matters, and if you have more Black women in the room, you'll see more of them on screen.
I mean, I need to see Amanda Waller outside of a cartoon. Like this was a woman in charge. We don't have that, and I think specifically there is a need to talk about Black pop culture and Black cultural production. That's part of the reason we started the clapback, and I know I'm working on the article about Nicki Minaj and the moment that happened at the BET Awards with her and Iggy Azalea. Breathe, save it for the page. But there's this discussion of how it's very strange when a lot of our major pop culture figures in music, in a lot of spaces, are Black women, but we don't see that replicated anywhere else. So, like, the spaces where Black women can be are allowed to make their own spaces, they become amazing, but they're not represented anywhere else.
Mm-hmm.
Like, say what you want, but you don't have a pop star conversation without talking about Beyonce. However you feel about her, that's the person you need to be talking about.
Right.
He's there. And the person right next to her is Rihanna. And then probably Nicki, and then you can get to Taylor Swift and Katy Perry.
Can we discuss Nicki right quick? I don't want to leave this conversation.
Okay, go ahead.
I'm talking about Anaconda.
I'm here for Nicki, girl.
Oh, Nicki is a Trinidadian, and Rihanna is a Bajan Guyanese. So I'm pure West Indian. Like allegiance means I'm always here for them. But go ahead.
You know, there was a great article in Grantland, surprisingly, Grantland of all places, about how Anaconda is actually a response to both. What is that? What was it called? Those two, Taylor Swift, and there was another girl who just did
Miley, Katie.
Yes, so it was sort of a kind of a clapback to them.
Mm-hmm.
But I almost feel like she would have done it anyway, regardless of whether or not they existed.
Okay.
You know,
That video is pure, like, sit down when it's Black girl time. Like,
right.
This is for my baby.
They exist, like, regardless and in spite of the fact that they exist. Why does it have to have anything to do with them? Even though maybe it did. Maybe, you know, but I don't know. She looks amazing. I'm going to start going to the gym 5 times a week this time now because, my goodness.
Nicki in that video makes you like, I'm not going to have no carbs.
Right, no carbs.
I'm going to get right. I'm going to get right.
I'm going to get right. No, I think it's
to
super
do
important.
hip opening exercises so that the twerking muscles can anyway.
I mean, it was very intentional that she used "Baby Got Back" as a sample, as like the base of the track.
Have you seen the video?
Yes.
And like there is a I'm looking at that article and I will read it. Who wrote this though?
Why don't you just ask it like that, Satan? You're like, who wrote this? Oh my god.
Because you know what, and this is the reason why you and I started our magazine in the first place. So don't ask me why I asked that. Because there's always this kind of, like, even in good writing, there's this assumption that Black cultural production is in response to something. Like I saw the Blues for Smoke exhibit, and I also saw there's a special article I'm writing for myself about Subtleties by Kara Walker. But there's this belief that we do not have an inner life and we don't have inner references. And what I got from the Anaconda video was this amazing moment of, this is a major, like, funded pop cultural production.
Right.
Who has the same references I do, who remembers things from the 80s, who remembers the Baby Got Back video the way I would as a West Indian descendant immigrant Black girl who played a lot of these games, who watched things like the Baby Got Back video, and as well as the Olivia Newton-John, and recognize these things that they're not necessarily responses or reactions, but they're like, this is how we consume culture. Like, I love the fact that it's very important to Nicki Minaj that in addition to see her performing like these amazing, like, great body isolations and very like West African traditional origin dance, also you needed to see her in a fitted in some Jordans. There's something about that idea of representing a sexuality where, like, if you are really talking in a certain milieu, a sexy girl who is on her fashion has a fly pair of Jordans, and it's shown.
Right.
I also think that if she was white, there'd be this whole conversation about, especially when you want to talk about millennials, because Nikki is our age, right? Like, she's what, 28? Yeah.
She's
So,
like 9, I think.
28, 20, yeah. So, like, so I feel like if she were white, on like the same video on, well, similar, because I don't booty shaking, because then that would be the Taylor Swift video. Anyway, but what a similar video with on a white body, I feel like the 80s references would become so clear, because I also was watching it, I was just like, isn't that the outfit that what's-her-face was like dancing to in like Sweet Cherry Pie, like the workout section? It was! And then like I looked it up, like she's wearing cowboy boots, but like the red, like, you know, kind of bikini thing, and then the high cut, high waisted jeans, and then like the red heels. That's such an 80s outfit. Like that's such a femme, like white femme 80s, like Christina Applegate or what's her face and Married with Children kind of outfit.
Let's take a moment to honor our like 80s rock goddesses in terms of the
Bobby, it was Bobby. Oh my God, what was her name? Is it Bobby Brown? I looked this up yesterday. She was in like the Warm video for Sweet Cherry Pie. It was like the girl from the video. I'm gonna have to like look this up, but it was that, and then kind of like the Olivia Newton-John, like Let's Get Physical.
She had that going on.
Yes, it was.
So, I was just the baby got.
It was so cool.
The baby got back.
Like, yeah.
Example was really important to me because, so when I was in fifth, sixth grade, I was going to a school where I was literally the only black child at the school, and
Bobby Brown.
I came home. And I told my mom, Mom, I'm looking at the girls in my class, and I just think that I am way fatter than they are. I'm 10, okay? I'm 10, 11 years old coming to my mother with this. And she said, Lauren, you're going to be shaped differently than them because you're black, okay? And she said, she says to me, remember the Baby Got Back video? My mother literally says to me, remember the Baby Got Black video? I said, yeah. She's like, that video is about black women, okay? And I just want you to don't see it as you being them being better than you because you have a bigger butt or whatever. You have to just learn that that's what makes you you.
Mm-hmm.
So that song and that sample will always mean a whole lot to me. I don't even know if Mommy remembers that, but
because this is, and I think this is what's important, and I think that this is in a very base and capitalistic and opportunistic and blah 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 way, but we all gotta eat. There is this rampant misunderstanding of who we are as millennials of color, as black women, specifically who we are here, and the work that we do, and the ways that we are trying to get through with our lives, that leaves lots of people who say they want interactions with us severely wanting. And I think that there are real opportunities to make that better, to make something like that have a much better interaction. And I think a lot of that comes down to our base, like the thing we started with this is that we are human. And a lot of these discussions are about regrounding ourselves in our humanity. We make our media because we're not seen. We organize because we are not surviving in cases.
Mm-hmm.
And how this idea of leadership and this idea of a millennial generation really obfuscates our adjustments that need to be made for basic survival. And how we are kind of changing that landscape. So that I just think is just super, super awesome. We are at exactly, I think, since we started about 60, 70 minutes. So I want to give everyone 3 minutes each to kind of just check out, give us any thoughts or anything that you want to follow up with, and we're going to wish you good night. So who wants to go first?
Uh, Not me.
I'll go first.
Okay.
Worked out great.
Me. I think it's really important to remember when you're talking about POC millennials and employment that a lot of times when employers say they can't find people of color or cannot find talented black people, it's that they don't want to or that they don't know how to look for them. So what I think is super important is creating networks and creating communities where we make ourselves visible, where we help support each other who are looking. Because of the fact that, I crowdsourced my job and essentially changing my entire life. I started crowdsourcing in March of 2012. By July of 2012, I was jumping on a plane to go to DC. And I just think it's important to kind of exchange tricks of the trade with each other. Because of what I went through, I do everything I can to help other people find jobs. And I think it's important that we use our networks for that. And but at the same time, challenging the people, the powers that be, to hire more of us and to find us, make ourselves almost hyper visible in a way.
Is it my turn?
Your turn.
Let's look at this article on IndieWire on Shadow and Act, which is a blog on IndieWire. Shadow and Act on Cinema of the African Diaspora. There is an article called The Collard Green Circuit, an Alternative Model for Distribution. And there's a pop-up ad. Distribution and Exhibition of Black Indies. And I haven't read it in a while, and I feel like I need to reread it because I feel like it's more of a commentary than sort of exploring this alternative model. But I mean, I think in terms of so I think when you're talking about the so this article is mostly kind of looking at, say, the art house releases and how they exclude black films and saying that we need a collard green circuit. But I also think it kind of goes into what Lauren was talking about, where, just being a millennial, I think it's kind of up to us to create these entirely new models of living in general, but I think also in terms of, this media thing and even this job thing and this living life thing again. I think I like the idea of cooperative economics. Shout out to Kwanzaa for teaching me the 7 principles. But of cooperative work in economics, right? The idea of us being communal with our work and being communal with our visions, right? You being I want a job, and as opposed to just doing this sort of individualizing whatever, I'm going to not only turn to my network, or simply turn to my network, I'm gonna build a new one in a sense. I'm just going to creatively use what I have, whether it's not just my network, but also the platforms I have and whatever audience community that I've built, to move forward. And I feel a lot of at least the most, I feel interesting and fulfilling things, usually not necessarily the most profitable things, but we know what our society values in terms of profit, have been because of a bunch of people got together and said, okay, come hell or high water, we're going to figure out a way to do this, whether it's go to a conference or launch a blog or, do a walk-in on a board of trustees and men ethnic studies. I think there's something about thinking about ways that we can pool our resources, and maybe that means that none of us will be filthy rich, but something better and more long-lasting can also come from that,
Mm-hmm.
I think the system where only a few of us are filthy rich kind of depends on the rest of us not being rich. But yeah, I really and I mean, I think the idea of sort of everything would be better if the New York Times hired Inc. That'll necessarily make things better.
It wouldn't hurt.
like I think there's like I think addressing like the gatekeepers and addressing, you know, what these places that are poaching, especially as they're poaching from us, right? Like it is important to continue to address our exclusion. But I think it's also important to like find a web series that's like featuring POC that you like and like donate to it or like send the link to your family, like put it on your Facebook, you know, because really we're all we've got, you know, like really at the end of the day, like no one else is really, you know, looking out for us but ourselves. So we have to look out for each other.
For me, it's, first of all, I want to thank everyone who tuned in, who listened, who's going to watch this later, that because I did a lot of this, mostly trying to find ways to talk about situations in my experience being an immigrant, being the child of a mechanic and a home healthcare worker, but also really well educated and also making myself an internet presence kind of just by the, I like stuff, I shall tell you about the stuff I like, and I'll tell you about the stuff I don't like. It has always been important to me that not only do we tell stories, but we look at how we tell these stories. We look at perspectives we tell these stories from. We look at how we are putting together these stories, and we try to do better. I know you are hyper, people are anti-capitalist and things like that, and that was just like, for me, in sometimes a practical sense, it's like, everyone can be happier and do better if you bring everyone in. You leave money on the table, you leave progress on the table when we are not part of that conversation. But more importantly, if you don't want us there, I want to grow a place where we can take care of ourselves. Who knows? I don't know. More out of the world things have happened than people get in a case of act right and deciding that they will do right by certain people has happened. But if not, I want us to have that safety, that freedom of being able to make these worlds for ourselves without a lot of the unnecessary dangers that are in our paths. You won't put us on TV, we make YouTube, but then we have to worry about being pilfered.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, you can either put us there, that's one option, or you can find a way for us to, you know, let our work live. I like the collard green circuit idea. But most importantly, I want us to really be a part of this conversation. There is too much based on our lives that is without us. And there's a lot of these attitudes that people can do good things for Black people, but millennial Black people, without doing things with us. So I'm going to be a voice for the millennials, but I don't have no Black folk. I'm going to be a voice for young women, but we don't have no Black folk of a certain kind, of a certain ilk. And more than anything, I think I want to push this conversation to where we're here, we are important, and you're going to hear from us, either by bringing us in or by us kicking over the door, breaking down the table, and building a whole new one. And I honestly think the second part is more likely. But I think it is amazing what we are doing, and I love this opportunity to kind of make a space for us to do it more. Small housekeepings. I will post the link to the finished conversation when we stop broadcasting on my Twitter. If you ladies would like to post it too. So if you missed us, you can watch. We will have more of these conversations at some point. I hope to get to it like once a month. I don't know exactly when. I am also, plug for me, applying for the North American AJ Plus Fellowship in hopes of diversifying and really putting together great voices and great social media and video media for North America with AJ Plus. So if you can support or give me a good word, please do. And is there anything you ladies would like to give a shout out to before we go?
I actually recently published a zine called Death Valley, or How to Not Kill Yourself in Less Than 10 Days. And right now, the top tweet on my account is for this, but I'm going to put a link to that back up on top after this goes down. So it's $3 if you order it by PayPal, $2 if you happen to know me in person. I can like hand you a copy. But yeah, so that's it.
With that, we would really like to once again give our support and love and just good vibes to the amazing, amazing communities in and around Ferguson doing their good work. Special shout out right now to all the people we've mentioned before, but also our Carnithia and the Way of Being who are down there right now doing things that we know them like personally. So we want to give them love. And also, if you can and you would like to donate or support them, please look at Organize MO as well as She So Siddidy SheSeauxSIDDITTY for donation opportunities. And we are sending so much love to you guys and for you guys. And if there's anything you need, please let us know. I am Black Amazon. This has been at Black Amazon on Twitter. Lauren is at L. Spell it for me, Lauren.
ELLE, so L like the magazine underscore, oh no, L like the magazine, dub like a reggae dub, underscore 1920.
And the fantastic Anasa at
SO_TREU.
If you would like to, go ahead. If you would like to shoot us any other questions, comments, the hashtag is hashtag MILENNIALSOFCOLOR. Thank you and have a great night. Bye bye.